In terms of burden sharing, we read and hear a lot in the media that the EU is at a breaking point. Near 1 million refugees in 2015. But it would seem to me that part of the issue is that many of the refugees are concentrated in a certain number of countries. I mean, the EU has over 500 million people. If we wanted to take that million refugees, we're talking about 1 refugee per 2,000 people if there was true burden sharing. And also to your point, in terms of burden sharing, the U.S. since 2011 has taken 2,500 Syrian refugees. So if you juxtapose that number to what the EU is dealing with, it just seems like there needs to be a healthier and more robust discussion within the international community about burden sharing.
Definitely. The refugee protection regime as it was conceived after the Second World War and as it is embodied in the 1951 Refugee Convention, which is really the fundamental treaty on how refugees should be handled. That regime was founded conceptually on the idea of burden sharing, that this would be a responsibility, even more than a burden, a responsibility shared globally between responsible states. And over the years, that, of course, has been implemented in many ways. We've seen very good examples. I gave the example of the Indo-Chinese refugees in the early 80s, sorry. That was a very great example of how a peace agreement was accompanied and strengthened and supported, or a series of peace agreements were supported by a sharing of responsibility for a very large caseload of refugees globally. I think the same is needed now. I think the Syria crisis has put back on the table this need that refugees are a global phenomenon. They can reach anywhere.
Sure.
And therefore, the responsibility to respond should always also be global.